It's March 20th here in Seoul, and I'm Dami. We begin with the stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with another rate freeze by the U.S. Federal Reserve. The U.S. Central Bank decided to hold its key interest rate steady between 4.25% and 4.5%. The Fed also projects higher inflation and revised down the outlook for growth and employment, citing tariff uncertainties. Following the 30-day energy truce proposal for the Ukraine war, the two leaders of the U.S. and Ukraine on Wednesday held phone talks, where Trump suggested to Zelenskyy that the U.S. should take over Ukrainian power plants for security. With the Constitutional Court yet to declare a ruling date for President Yoon Suk Yeol's impeachment trial over his martial law order, speculations are high that the ruling will come next week. The justices will continue their discussions on Thursday. In line with widespread market expectations, the U.S. Federal Reserve has kept its lending rate steady, while acknowledging uncertainties stemming from Trump's tariff policies. Our Lee Soo-jin starts us off.
The U.S. Federal Reserve has decided to once again keep its benchmark interest rate unchanged, but signal potential rate cuts in future meetings. In its second monetary policy meeting of the year on Wednesday, the central bank kept its key borrowing rate steady at its current range of 4.25% to 4.5%. The Federal Open Market Committee has put a pause in its rate-cutting cycle since December last year after carrying out 3 consecutive reductions. The decision comes as Federal Reserve officials lowered their outlook for economic growth for this year to 1.7% from 2.1% in their December projection.
Uncertainty today is unusually elevated. As the economy evolves, we will adjust our policy stance in a manner that best promotes our maximum employment and price stability goals.
The Fed's goals of maintaining maximum employment and low inflation are referred to as its dual mandate. Powell said that the uncertainty comes from the changes that policies, particularly trade, but also immigration, fiscal policy, and regulation, will bring to the economy. The rate-setting committee, which releases a summary of economic projections after its March, June, September, and December meetings, projected slightly higher unemployment of 4.4% from 4.3% by the end of the year. Inflation was also forecast to rise as personal consumption expenditure, a measure of consumer spending, and core inflation, which excludes energy and food prices, were both revised upward. Powell acknowledged that tariffs have already contributed to the rise in inflation. The Trump administration imposed 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum imports last Wednesday, triggering retaliatory tariffs from Canada and the EU, with reciprocal U.S. tariffs set for April 2nd. But with officials expecting the Fed to implement a total of 0.5 percentage point in rate cuts in 2025, 2 reductions are likely this year as rate cuts are typically in quarter-point increments. This latest decision keeps the interest rate gap between South Korea and the U.S. at 1.75 percentage points, with the Bank of Korea slashing its key interest rate to 2.75% in its last meeting in February. All 3 major U.S. stock indexes, the Dow Jones, S&P 500, and the Nasdaq, showed an upward trajectory following the Fed's decision. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
The leaders of the U.S. and Ukraine held phone talks about moving towards a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine, with Trump suggesting that Washington could control Ukraine's power plants for security purposes. Our Choi Soo-hyung reports.
U.S. President Trump and Ukraine's President Zelenskyy have had a direct phone call to talk about a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. On Wednesday local time, Trump posted on his social media platform Truth Social that call to align both Russia and Ukraine in terms of the request and needs lasted about an hour and went smoothly. Trump said Zelenskyy also agreed on a partial ceasefire for energy and infrastructure facilities. During the call, Trump suggested that the U.S. could help with nuclear power plant operations using its expertise in the energy sector.
He said that the United States could be very helpful in running those plants with its electricity and utility expertise. American ownership of those plants would be the best protection for that infrastructure and support for Ukrainian energy infrastructure.
The White House added that the U.S. will continue to provide intelligence resources to Ukraine to end the war. This means that Trump rejected Putin's demand to stop military support and intelligence sharing with Ukraine.
They reviewed the situation in Kursk and agreed to share information closely between their defense staffs as the battlefield situation evolved.
President Zelenskyy also reportedly requested additional air defense systems, including the Patriot missile system, and Trump said he would work to find available systems in Europe to support Ukraine. Trump also promised to help ensure that children who were kidnapped or went missing during the war could return to Ukraine. Regarding the partial deal, on Tuesday after the call with Putin, the White House stated that the U.S. position supports a ceasefire for energy and infrastructure, not just energy infrastructure, as Russia claims. The U.S. will continue negotiations with Russia for a wider ceasefire deal in meetings in Saudi Arabia in the end of this week. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
Now, over in Gaza, Israeli forces have resumed ground operations in the region, taking control of a key land corridor on Wednesday. Our Lee Seung-jae tells us more.
Airstrikes in Gaza on Tuesday killed at least 400 Palestinians, ending the 2 months of relative calm in the enclave. On Wednesday, Israel resumed ground offensives following the end of the first phase of the ceasefire agreement earlier this month and killed dozens more. Israeli forces say it regained control of the Netzarim corridor in order to expand a security zone and create a partial buffer between the northern and southern regions of the Gaza Strip. The Israeli military had withdrawn from the corridor last month, allowing civilians in central and southern Gaza to return to what little remained of their homes in the north. The resumption of Israeli strikes comes as the two sides have failed to come to an agreement on the second phase of the ceasefire deal that would have released more Israeli hostages. Meanwhile, with the resumption of Israeli strikes, the United Nations says one of its workers was killed and others injured after a compound in Gaza was damaged on Wednesday. The Palestinian Health Ministry blamed an Israeli strike, while Israel's military denied striking the UN compound in Deir al-Balah. The UN Office for Project Services said that an explosive ordnance was dropped or fired at the compound. However, added that there was no confirmation on the nature of the incident or the type of artillery used. The UN OPS stressed that the incident was not an accident, while UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemned the attack and called for a full investigation. More than 300 humanitarian workers have been killed in Gaza since October 7, 2023, with most being staff members of the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees in the Near East. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
It's been 3 weeks since the hearings for President Yoon Suk Yeol's impeachment trial wrapped up, and a ruling date is still up in the air, which further solidifies speculation that the ruling will happen next week. Our correspondent Oh Si-young reports.
3 weeks and counting, the Constitutional Court is yet to announce when it will rule on President Yoon Suk Yeol's impeachment, meaning there will be no verdict this week. As of Wednesday, 22 days since Yoon's final trial hearing was held, the court has not revealed the date it would make the fateful ruling. Given that the court notified former Presidents Park Geun-hye and Roh Moo-hyun 2 to 3 days in advance of their respective ruling dates, Yoon's verdict is now expected to take place next week at the earliest. The 8-member bench is reportedly continuing to deliberate on Yoon's impeachment. The longer-than-expected process has given rise to diverse speculation over what's holding up the justices. Some experts believe they have already decided unanimously to impeach President Yoon and are fine-tuning their positions to deliver an indisputable judgment amid fears that the result may trigger extreme reactions from the public. The Seoul Western District Court's approval to extend a warrant to detain Yoon prompted violence from his supporters. Some believe the bench may be divided ideologically and are struggling to align their views, given how an earlier impeachment case of Korea Communications Commission Chair Lee Jin-suk was dismissed, as the justices' opinions were split evenly in line with their political orientations. In any case, the justices are facing growing calls to make a swift decision as Yoon's prolonged suspension from office hinders effective governance of the nation. The bench is also under significant political pressure. Those supporting Yoon's impeachment wish to quickly trigger a snap presidential election, which polls show would largely favour opposition Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung. Meanwhile, conservatives, including Yoon supporters, are calling for the case to be dismissed, or for the court to deliver a ruling after Lee Jae-myung's own verdict on one of his 5 criminal cases next Tuesday.
If 6 or more justices agree to uphold the impeachment, Yoon will be removed from office immediately, triggering an early presidential election that must be held within 60 days. If 3 or more justices are against impeachment, Yoon will return to his office and resume his duties. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
So the justices are really taking their time before they rule to reinstate or remove President Yoon over his martial law order. We turn to a legal expert Kim Ji-soo for more this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So Ji-soo, no announcement yet. Is it safe to say the ruling will come next week?
Well, not necessarily, I would say. The court usually announces a ruling 2 to 3 days in advance in order to allow enough time for the government agencies and law enforcement to be prepared. However, last Wednesday's ruling was delayed, and this Wednesday's ruling was also expected, but it didn't happen. So at this point, nothing is certain right now, and the ruling could be delayed up until April. And currently, the justices are holding closed-door deliberations, and no one knows exactly when they will reach a final decision.
Well, that's why speculations abound over why the court's decision is being delayed. Now, some say the 8 justices are having a difficult time narrowing their disagreements. Ji-soo, what's your take on it?
So I know that there are reports that the decisions is already made, but the justices are just fine-tuning the ruling words in order to avoid any kind of legal loopholes. However, if the court had fully agreed on either dismissal or approval, there would be no reason for such a delay. And while they agree on the basic facts, the real debate is whether on those facts actually violate the Constitution and laws, and if they are serious enough to justify the removal. So it seems that these legal interpretations are causing significant disagreements among the justices, which leads to the prolonging.
Well, speaking of the timing of the ruling, does the ruling time matter in any way? I mean, will the ruling take place in the morning or in the afternoon? Doesn't matter in any way.
So the court usually announces major rulings in the morning, like Park Geun-hye's case, it was at 11 a.m. A morning ruling allows time for media coverage, government responses, and public reaction during the day. And an afternoon ruling could mean last-minute deliberations or security concerns, which might cause more confusion and more public unrest. So given past cases, Yoon's ruling will likely be scheduled for 10 to 11 a.m. to ensure a clear and organized response.
Right, that is why we were expecting Friday morning to be the big day, considering we are ahead of the weekend so that we have more time to digest. But do you think the ruling will be aired live this time or recorded, considering what we went through, including all the violence at the Seoul Western District Court?
So the court has traditionally aired impeachment rulings alive, including Park Geun-hye's in 2017. However, as you mentioned, there were security concerns after the recent violations at the Seoul Western District Court could change that. If authorities believe a live announcement could lead to immediate unrest, they might opt for a recorded broadcast to control the timing and security measures. If the ruling is broadcast live, we expect strictly security measures in and around the court.
Well, some say, last but not least, the ruling for Prime Minister Han Duck-soo's impeachment trial will come after Yoon Suk Yeol's trial. Now, why does it matter which one comes first? Does it matter in any way, Yoon's or Han's?
So first, Prime Minister Han Duck-suk's hearing ended 6 days before Yoon's on February 19th, but no ruling date has been set even after nearly a month. So reports suggest that the justices have not yet held a final vote, meaning they're not have reached any kind of conclusions. And there is a possibility that Han's ruling will be announced together with Yoon's, as both cases involve martial law concerns and government instability. However, it seems that the two cases should be handled separately since they're legally different. And I would say that the court and myself could prioritize Yoon's case more, and Han's ruling could be pushed it up to next week.
All right, Jisoo, thank you so much for connecting with us this morning. We appreciate it as always.
Thank you.
The EU is responding to high U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum products by announcing a reduction in steel and aluminum imports. According to a European Commission Vice President, Stefan Sejourné, on Wednesday, the EU will reduce steel and aluminum imports by up to 15% starting April 1st. This comes amid concerns that the Trump administration's 25% steel tariff will lead to steel exporters flooding the European market. Now, the move is expected to impact South Korean steel exporters, as the fourth largest economy in Asia ranks third among all EU imports. South Korea's total national debt has surpassed 6,200 trillion won, approximately 4.76 trillion US dollars. On Thursday, the Bank for International Settlements reported that in Korean won terms, the country's total debt at the end of the third quarter of 2024 had increased by over 4% compared to the same period the previous year. Now, the corporate debt is the largest type of debt, followed by household debt and then government debt. Although government debt is the smallest, it saw the highest growth rate, surging by approximately 11%. South Korea's total debt surpassed 6,000 trillion won for the first time at the end of the fourth quarter of 2023. Nearly half of North Korea's population is estimated to be undernourished, says a recent UN report. The report submitted to the UN Human Rights Council by Elizabeth Salman, the UN Special Rapporteur on North Korean human rights, estimated that about 12 million people, that's roughly 46% of the population, have been undernourished in recent years. Despite efforts to boost domestic food production, chronic food insecurity remains a major issue in the north. The report pointed to aging infrastructure, outdated technology, and frequent natural disasters as key factors that are worsening the crisis.
Good morning, I'm Choi Ji-hee, and this is The World Now. Starting in Turkey, which is seeing widespread protests following the arrest of Istanbul mayor and potential presidential candidate Ekrem İmamoğlu. On Wednesday local time, Turkey authorities detained İmamoğlu on charges of corruption and alleged links to terrorist organizations. The arrest comes just days before the Republican People's Party primaries, where İmamoğlu, a prominent opposition figure against President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, was anticipated to be nominated as the presidential candidate for the 2028 elections. İmamoğlu's party has denounced the detention as a coup, arguing that it's politically motivated to undermine the opposition. In response to the arrest, thousands of citizens have taken to the streets in Istanbul and Ankara to protest what they see as a violation of democratic processes. The Turkey government has refuted allegations linking İmamoğlu's detention to President Erdogan. Over in Africa, the presidents of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda convened in Qatar to address the escalating conflict in eastern DRC in their first in-person encounter since hostilities resurged in the region earlier this year. President Felix Tshisekedi of the DRC and President Paul Kagame of Rwanda met in Doha on Tuesday, facilitated by Qatari Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. The leaders jointly called for an immediate and unconditional ceasefire in eastern DRC to stop the ongoing violence that has resulted in thousands of deaths and the displacement of millions. The conflict intensified in January when the M23 rebel group, reportedly backed by Rwanda, captured key cities in the mineral-rich eastern region of the DRC. The DRC government accuses Rwanda of supporting the M23 rebels, while Rwanda denies the claim, asserting its forces act in self-defense. In Germany, the outgoing government has approved approximately $3.3 billion in additional military aid for Ukraine. The decision, announced by the Finance Ministry on Wednesday local time, follows a recent fiscal policy overhaul that allows increased borrowing to support defense initiatives. The aid package includes $2.8 billion allocated for immediate military assistance, supplemented by reimbursements from the European Peace Facility. Germany also plans to commit an additional $8.9 billion between 2026 and 2029 to bolster Ukraine's defense capabilities. Meanwhile, German automaker Mercedes-Benz is integrating AI-powered humanoid robots into its manufacturing processes at the Digital Factory campus in Berlin. According to reports on Tuesday, the automaker is testing the 175 centimeters Apollo robot in collaboration with the US-based robotics firm Apptronik to handle tasks such as transporting components and conducting quality inspections. Unlike traditional factory robots, Apollo isn't fixed and can move around. The aim is to enhance efficiency by automating repetitive and physically demanding activities and allowing human workers to focus on more complex tasks.
Today is the spring equinox, the day when daylight and nighttime hours are nearly equal. And just as the season suggests, the lingering chill is finally backing off this afternoon. Temperatures will jump quite a bit from yesterday afternoon. Now, as the cold eases, air quality is becoming an issue. Ultrafine dust levels will be bad across the capital area, Chungcheongdo, Jeollado provinces, and Daegu. Meanwhile, eastern regions may see temporary spikes in pollution, especially in the morning and late at night. On the bright side, the sky will stay clear throughout the day nationwide, but with strong winds. The East Coast might see typhoon force gusts, so please stay safe. The afternoon should feel much warmer, going 4 to 9 degrees higher than Wednesday. Seoul will climb to 14 degrees Celsius. Gwangju, Busan, Jeju will be topping out at 15 degrees. Looking ahead to the weekend, expect more sunshine and pleasant spring warmth. Just remember, the temperature swings will remain big, so do dress accordingly.
That is all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.